Good afternoon. My name's Edward Hughes. I'm the president of the Harvard Business School Club of San Diego, and welcome to our CEO Forum. In a few minutes, I'll introduce our guest, and I'm really excited to have him on because this is going to be a different type of webinar than I usually do, and probably way more interesting for you guys as well. Thank you, firstly, to our sponsors. Let me get rid of that little thing over there. Hold on. For sponsoring the club. Let me talk a little bit about the club before we get into our main event. So our mission as a club is to continue to educate leaders who make a difference in the world and make San Diego a great place to live and work. And we do this through a number of key initiatives. Our first thing is our CEO forums. We invite interesting companies from all over the world. Today we have a San Diego-based company, so that's super exciting to have. But we invite from all over the world, and we like to hear the stories about what's going on in the organization, what kind of challenges they face, and try and have that dialogue with the CEO so we can learn about that. The second is we do management development programs here in San Diego. We bring a little slice of Boston, of HBS to San Diego, and we do that in the fall with a for-profit program, which is 11 weeks, absolutely fantastic program, 2 cases a night on a Monday night. And then we do it in the spring for the nonprofit community here in San Diego. And that's a 7-week program, 2 cases a night as well. Really great programs for people who are interested in giving their talent some additional tools. People who are interested in learning and becoming high potential performers in your organizations. And the third thing that we do is we have a strong emphasis on the social enterprise here in San Diego. We believe that to live our mission of making San Diego a great place to live and work, we like to support nonprofit organizations. We think that, as a alumni club, we've benefited of going to Harvard Business School. And now if we can basically help the leadership of nonprofits here in San Diego improve their business skills, their vision, their management, their leadership, they're going to build more sustainable organizations. Earlier this week, in fact, yesterday, we had the lunch where 3 CEOs are about to head off to Boston next month for a week-long program called Strategic Perspectives in Nonprofit Management. Absolutely terrific program. We've done this now. We've had 50 people go through this program over the last 14 or so years, and it's had a huge impact on organizations here in San Diego. So we're thrilled about that, and we're very excited for the new cohort 3 CEOs to go. And we'll be giving you updates on some of the impact they have and what they learned from that program. Upcoming, we have Armen Panussian, who is the co-CEO of Oaktree Capital, as you know, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm. That's on July 8th. They've been a very aggressive PE firm, so we're looking forward to hearing about how they're doing, what's going on in the economy. Obviously, a lot of stuff's happening in the economy, how they think about things going forward. And then we're going to be rolling into our management development program in September. If you have organizations where you have people that are managers and looking to participate in an exciting program, please look out for the emails. Please sign them up. It really is a fantastic format. Today is going to be a webinar format. So it's going to be myself and our guest. But please, feel free to type in questions as we go along. So I'll try to address them. As I say, it's going to be very interesting what we have here today. So let me stop sharing. And right, today our guest is Andy Powers, who is the president, CEO, chief designer of Taylor Guitars. Andy is, you're about to hear, has been a musician, a guitar builder since the age of 10. So he's built instruments, sold instruments, built his own company. And then in 2011, at the invitation of Bob Taylor, the co-founder of Taylor Guitars, invited to join Taylor Guitars. Bob called him the best guitar builder he's ever met. And in 2019, he became an ownership partner. In 2022, became president and CEO. Taylor Guitars is an employee-owned organization, and it's doing well. I'm not a guitar or a musician, but the people who I know say Taylor's like the best guitar company in the world. So we are super excited to have Andy join us today. And Andy, thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good fun to spend some time with you all.
Yeah, now we had the opportunity to visit your facility. About a dozen of us came out maybe a month or so ago, and wow, what an amazing team! What an amazing facility! What a passion for the business you guys have. So it's great to have this in San Diego because obviously you're a respected company globally. But maybe we can start with how did you get into at the age of 10? You're building guitars. Tell me a bit about that story.
Yeah, my mom and dad are both hobbyist musicians. My dad's a carpenter by trade, and my mom is a very kind of artistic person, does a lot of, ceramics and flowers or all painting, all kinds of things. And so when I grew up, there was a lot of music around and there was a lot of woodworking.
Mhm.
And I was very interested in guitars. I loved the instrument. I loved the form of it. I loved that it was made of wood. I loved the songs that came out of the thing. It was like a magic box in some ways. And so one day, my dad, being a carpenter, he would bring scraps of wood home from his jobs. He brought home a big piece of wood. It was big enough for me to try making a guitar out of. And so I had the idea, well, I'll build a guitar. That sounds like fun. I was 7 or 8 years old at the time. So I worked on it. And I mean, when I say guitar, that's being generous. It's really more of a guitar shaped object. It was, a childish attempt at a guitar. And so I did everything that you're not supposed to do. I was trying to invent ways. I didn't know that there were parts that are specific kinds of things. So I worked on this idea for a couple weeks, had, six mismatched tuning keys. I had, a used set of guitar strings. And I got the thing together, started to put the strings on and tune it up to pitch, and it exploded into a pile of splinters right there on my workbench. And I was kind of dumbfounded. I didn't know what to make of that. So I was horrified and kind of thrilled at the same time because, it was like somebody put a firecracker inside.
Yeah.
And so from then on, I was hooked. I was building instruments. I couldn't wait to get another piece of wood and try again. And second guitar broke, third guitar played just a little bit before it broke. And so I continued on because, well, it just seemed, it was interesting. It caught my attention. And so by the time I was maybe 12, 13 years old, I was doing a lot of repairs for all the local music shops. I was building and selling instruments to, it started with friends and then, friends of friends, turned into some professional musicians, turned into some collectors and then museums. And it kind of just spread organically. And so I officially started into business as a micro scale business when I was so around 12 or 13. And I'm
Wow.
I'm not quite so embarrassed now because I started a business officially because I got in trouble with the IRS. That's not something that's on the radar of a
Not at 12 or 13 you got in trouble with the
I
IRS.
I got a angry letter and
Wow.
and so I got this letter in the mailbox, ran inside, showed it to my parents, and asked them like, what do I do with this? What's going to happen? And they looked at it. My dad starts laughing. He goes, well, I'll tell you what it means. It means you made too much money and somebody noticed. You better go fix it. And
Wow.
so I ended up having to create some workarounds because I wasn't legally old enough to work yet. And so I kind of figured out some workarounds for that and then had been building instruments, repairing them, restoring them ever since then. So I did that
Wow.
all throughout my teenage years into my 20s. I studied music formally because was always playing as a musician. So I'd record music professionally, I'd play shows. Never really liked the touring thing because having grown up here in San Diego, you realize this is a nice place to be. It's nice to be by the ocean. The weather's great, and I loved what I was doing. And then about the time I was finishing college, I, you kind of as a new graduate, you go through that process to go, well, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to get a job. What do I do? How do I start a career? What kind of career am I supposed to have? I mean, I'm a musician and a guitar maker. And, all my friends, they're either going out on tour with different acts or some are getting teaching jobs or they're going to different aspects. Some are looking into the business world. And I realized, what? Well, wait a minute. I've been in business for more than 10 years now. All my bills are paid. and I absolutely love what I'm doing. I'll just do this instead of a job. Because at the time I finished college, I had a waiting list of several years, and I was kind of, I was in a position where I realized I can't stop what I'm doing because I've taken deposits on years worth of work that's in front of me. I've got to get all those guitars built. I don't have any time to go look for a job or a career. I'll just keep doing this. And so that was kind of my Mr. Magoo sort of plan, is it organically developed into a guitar making profession.
Wow, I mean, it's great that you're able to do your passion. The story reminds me of Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers, where he talks about you become world class after you've done 10,000 hours in this. And so, whether it's Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, all these
Yeah,
guys grew up programming. The hockey guys from Canada, they grew up playing so young. Sounds like you did your 10,000 hours building guitars, and that's why you became
yeah,
world class at designing them.
that was very much the case. Actually, I had a really nice conversation with Malcolm about that very thing. He goes, "You've spent the 10,000 hours before you ever noticed that you had spent them." Because I
Wow.
was a kid. I mean, I was that fortunate circumstance of having started so young that it didn't matter if I was making money or not, or if I lost my shirt on one particular job or something, because well, I'm living with my mom and dad. I'm 14 years old. There's nothing riding on this yet. It's not a big risk. And so I was kind of very fortunate. I'd say just plain old lucky to get started that young, because it is a difficult thing to put those 10,000 hours or more into becoming an expert. And having done all kinds of different eras of instruments in a lot of different styles, instruments from every guitar maker around the world from all different eras, having worked on them, restored them, built in that styles, tried to accommodate whatever musicians were asking me for. That created kind of the environment where I could learn about how the instruments work themselves. How do you design a guitar? When a musician comes to you and says, "Well, I want this guitar to have more empathy." Well, there's no measurement on my ruler that says empathy. I have, the metric system, I have the customary system, but what is that? And so you kind of find out what that is for that musician. Go, oh, that means when you play like this, you want to feel this, or you want to hear this thing come out of it because you're playing a such and such model built in such and such an era. And, so there's lots of little things that you learn along the way. And,
And
and
how did you actually? I mean, I've seen your factory. It's got big equipment. You shape wood and all. There's all kinds of complexity. How are you building a guitar and shaping it in your parents' garage?
in the same way that I would have done it 300 years ago.
Okay.
An instrument can be designed and built with very simple tools if you have a lot of ingenuity in how you're going to do it. Now, what that gives you is unlimited flexibility. Because let's say if you want to build or bend the piece of wood for the size that make that really pretty curvature, well, you do it by heating up a piece of pipe and soaking a piece of wood in some water and then carefully forming it around that. That means that you could create whatever sinuous kind of form you're looking for.
Mm.
It gives you unlimited flexibility to decide what kind of an instrument you want to make. In a factory environment, the way that we work now, well, I actually use both of those methods where I will create a one-off instrument as a prototype to decide, well, here's what we should make next. Here's what musicians are after. Here's what form I think it should come in. I'll go make that by hand. And then we'll work with our team of toolers, machinists, engineers to go, okay, here is the prototype. Here is the guitar that we want to make. Now let's figure out how to industrialize this on a wide scale so that thousands of musicians around the world could enjoy this one design.
Okay. All right. So we've established that you put your 10,000 hours in. You became world class in design. You were an entrepreneur. You're doing the thing that you wanted to do. How did you become part of Taylor and why Taylor Guitars?
Yeah, that was actually a kind of another left turn for me because I was in the kind of the fortunate position of going, well, I'm doing pretty well. I enjoy the work that I'm doing. Enjoy the scale that I'm doing it at. And I was playing music still. I ended up playing at like a trade show event with another musician friend of mine, a singer fellow named Jason Mraz. And so we were doing a duet kind of thing at the time, and we performed on behalf of Taylor at this event. And so Bob Taylor and I, we got reacquainted. Our paths had crossed once or twice before then. And so we started, just kind of a casual conversation about some things. And then a number of months later, he calls me out of the blue and goes, "Hey, look, you need to come down here to the factory. Come alone. I want to talk to you." And I'm thinking, you're going to push me into the wood chipper or something. I don't know what I did I don't know what I did to make you mad, but.
Yeah.
And so he laid out a kind of a vision for the future where he and our other partner, Kurt Listug, they had founded this company with the intention of building great instruments, putting them into the hands of musicians, and doing it in a way that's beneficial for the employees, for themselves, for the musicians, for the forest. And they don't want that to stop. They wanted to continue that. And so he kind of approached me and said, "Well, look, if you could combine what you're good at doing with what we know how to do, our community of customers, our musicians, they would benefit from this. Not to mention all of the employees who work with us, all of the suppliers whose livelihoods depend on providing materials for these designs, not to mention all the retailers around the world whose livelihoods depend on selling these designs. It's a better usage of the things that we have at our disposal." So I went, okay, well, if you put it that way, let's try. Let's do this.
Okay. So you joined up. What did you start as? Was it a designer? Or?
Yeah, I was as the chief designer to go,
Okay.
okay, well, it was, at that point, it was still privately owned by Bob and Kurt, the two founders. And I came in as the chief designer to go, okay, here's a new direction for the guitars. Here's how we can do this. I can design what we need. I can design what the product should be. I can see how musicians continue to evolve and how they want to use the instruments. And so we did that a lot, which freed them up to pursue other interests that were very important to the business.
Interesting, interesting. So I spent a little bit of time in the golf industry at TaylorMade, and we had the view we want to be the best performance golf brand in the world. And the key for that was getting some of the best players in the world to be playing our equipment. And we very much believed in what we call the pyramid of influence. So if you get the best players, etc., they'll influence the club pros, who will influence the best players in the clubs, etc. Sounds like you guys went after, and Bob Taylor was, very interested in building guitars for leading artists. Tell me how important these artists are in establishing the Taylor guitar brand name.
I very much agree with your assessment that you have that pyramid of influence because there are the taste makers up at the top. They are the professional players that you could name, a handful right off the top of your head and go, yeah, they determine what songs you're hearing on the radio, what you'll see at a Super Bowl halftime show or some other big event. But the vast majority of the music world is actually made of recreational level players,
Mhm.
right? Just like in the golf industry or
Exactly.
maybe with bicycles or any other kind of serious enthusiast interest.
Right.
Okay, we need the bulk of these recreational users to support the kind of overall volume that we want to do.
Right.
And I believe that it's very important. It's perhaps more important for the recreational users to have a great experience than for a professional player.
Right.
It takes on an outsized importance in their life. So if somebody comes back to their home after a long day of work and they go, look, I only know how to play 3 chords, but man, this gives me something that I did not have all day when I play these 3 chords. Or if I go out onto the links on the weekend and go, I'm going to play this, and for that time, I am going to be far away from anything that I'm thinking about or worried about or struggling with. It matters to people. That's an important experience. And so for us, certainly we want to work with great artists. We always have. We enjoy a close relationship with those artists. But it is a whole pyramid of people that we want to make sure have a great musical experience.
Yeah, I mean, in golf, everybody goes out. They always want to play a bit better. They want to have the equipment that can allow them to play better.
Right.
And I'm sure it's the same in guitars, which is, hey, I may not be the greatest player, but at least my guitar has got the capability of playing great music. So
Yeah,
uh, I can,
it is interesting. It's a little different than some things in that, like with say golf, you have. I'm not a golfer. I kind of think of it as a great walk that's been spoiled with a little tiny BB that you're trying to hit with a radio antenna.
sometimes it is.
But I look at that and go, okay, well, yeah, you want the great experience, but it is a very quantifiable thing.
Yep.
So if you could take a few strokes off your game,
Yep.
okay, that's an improvement. For
Yep.
something like guitar, you have your ability, but what you're looking for is more of a source of inspiration. How does
Okay.
this instrument make you feel? How does it contribute to your betterment, your well-being? Like what does it inspire you to do? How does it inspire you to listen differently or lean into that experience? It's a very emotive kind of a thing to be immersed in.
You might mention Jason Mraz, you playing with him, and I know he's been a big Taylor guitar person. Taylor Swift, another
Yes.
Taylor guitar. So
Yeah.
how did that come about?
So Taylor Swift, originally actually her father, Scott, had gotten in touch with us. I mean, we get demo tapes from all kinds of people.
Yep.
Hey, my daughter's really, really gifted. Yep, I have kids myself. I know that feeling.
Yep.
He said, no, really, I mean it. And so we actually got in touch with Taylor when she was very young, had her play at some different events. We built a guitar for her. In fact, she had a record release party here at our factory one time for I think it was the Fearless record, something like that. So anyway, we've enjoyed really great relationship with a lot of artists and artists over different eras. It's fascinating to me now looking back at, say, the 50-year history of Taylor guitars and looking at the way that different artists have influenced each other. So like if you were to take Taylor Swift and then go back a little bit further, you go, well, look at an artist, another San Diego-based artist like Jewel. Okay, well, you could take Jewel or Dave Matthews or one of those artists, trace them back a little farther, and look at the development of what we now call fingerstyle guitar. It was a different style of playing the instrument and writing songs all to begin with. And so there's this continued evolution of how that enthusiast user base is using the instrument. Whether you're a pro player looking for your next source of inspiration and how that trickles down into our experience as recreational players. They're all connected to each other.
So how would that show up in a sound? Like you've got a guitar, obviously,
Okay.
you're holding. So how does that show up that evolution?
Okay, so let's say a quick evolution through acoustic guitar. If we thought of acoustic guitar as being like a folk instrument, you have songwriters like Bob Dylan strumming a guitar as an accompaniment instrument.
Okay.
Well, there came a time, really something that Taylor guitars kind of ushered in because our instruments would play easier. So you had people, instead of strumming, they might play a song like, in a way, bringing almost more some like electric guitar or piano like influence, where you're playing harmonic parts, melodic parts, rhythms all together on one instrument. And so then you could look and see the way that develops into further songwriters. Let's say if you were to take Dave Matthews or Jewel, coming out of that, you hear something like, it's a different kind of a thing. Or something like that. Okay, so you see this kind of slow progression over time. And so as a designer, we want to build the instruments that help lead musicians down that path.
So how do you balance then the fact, I mean, you named obviously some terrific artists over quite some time period that you did all that on one instrument, which is probably one of your newer models, I guess.
Mhm.
How do you design a guitar that can play how Bob Dylan played all the way to how a very modern player plays the guitar?
Right. Okay, so there's two things that are both true at the same time. They feel like they're kind of at odds, but really they're two peaks on one iceberg. One of them is that for every style, every musician, every context, there will be an instrument that is so well suited for that environment. It's the it really becomes the one that you want to play, right? It would be like the analogy of using the perfect golf club for a perfect
Okay.
setup on the ball. What's also true is that a musical instrument can attain a level where it's so good that it becomes very adaptable to different styles of playing. It might be best at one thing, but it would easily play a lot of different styles. And then it becomes more the sound of the musician. Because what we really hear is really a relationship between the musician and the instrument. This guitar doesn't sound like anything until someone starts playing it,
Okay.
right? And as a musician, I don't sound like much unless I have an instrument to play. So you could take, let's say, a Steinway Model D piano. Great piano. A lot of different famous players have played on that instrument. You could look at Vladimir Horowitz. You could look at Dr. John McCoy Tyner. Those musicians sound nothing like each other. All brilliant musicians playing very different kinds of music on the same instrument.
So, and sometimes I used to work a little bit with Jack Nicklaus in the golf and he industry, and he'd give us feedback, and some of the other top players give us feedback. How important is that feedback for you in terms of getting to that guitar that either they want or something that you think a broader audience is going to want to have? Are they that good at that, or is it really you just kind of customizing to make something that fits to their ear?
What I like doing as a designer is taking feedback clearly from top players, but from a wide variety of players, and then watching the places where they overlap. Because if I were to be building a guitar, let's say for Zach Brown, okay, he's a
Yep.
country artist, great player, his unique needs are well suited for the stages that he's playing on, the set of music that he's going to be touring behind, the wardrobe that he's wearing, all kinds of different criteria that are very circumstance specific. But that isn't the circumstance that the broad user base is going to be playing in. And so I want to take some of those pieces and go, okay, now let's try it amongst a little wider range of musicians, wider variety of styles, different size stages, things like that. And then see where everyone agrees. Go, okay, those are the parts that are most important.
Hmm.
And so a lot of
So
times I'll take that kind of feedback and put that into the instrument.
So again, this is my ignorance. Obviously, country music's taken off enormously. So are there particular styles of guitars that are more popular for country music than others?
Yeah, yeah, very much. So, like in this case, this would be an example of wanting to address that trend toward music because, well, we've had certainly the eras of the fingerstyle musician becoming very popular. What we're seeing now, or what I'm watching as a player and a designer, is more musicians swinging back toward like a blend of what has come before and what came before that. So you're seeing more of that cymbal strumming come back into their songwriting. Go, okay, well, I want to build instruments that emphasize that approach. And so that when a player picks it up, aesthetically, tactile aspect of the instrument, the sonic aspect of the instrument, everything is leaning in the right direction to help contribute to their music.
Hmm. And how many designers do you have? Is it you and a small team? Is it there's it's a big group?
Well, it's from the design standpoint, it's me and a small working with a small team. But then
Yep.
here at Taylor, we have a much bigger engineering, machinist, and tooling team because the guitar is one thing, but then like any other commercial product, you have to have the ability to make the product.
Right.
So it's not just the design, but it's the ability to make it. Now that was one of the things that's so unique about Taylor and learning how to partner with this factory. It's actually two factories, and go, okay, well, great, we have a great design. It sounds great, it feels great, it looks great. How in the world are we going to make this? Well, that means that you do it with intention and you look at every single part of every design, every aspect of that product, and go, we want to be able to build this using modern methods. Okay, we need to design tools. We need to, well, there's no place where I can go buy these tools. That means that we have to make the tools. So we're going to create the design, then we're going to create the tools that would allow us to industrialize that design. Then we're going to create the space that those tools get worked in, the methods of working. Then we're going to look at how we source the materials to build those designs with. Because we're working in a very traditional space with woods from all over the world. And that world is changing all the time. So we need to constantly adapt how we're acquiring material and bring them in and look at, okay, what can we work with now? I mean, the short summary for instrument builders, for hundreds and hundreds of years, as an industry, we've worked like hunter-gatherers. You go out into the forest, you find a piece of wood that's what you need, you take it back, you're good. You have what you need. But the reality is we can't do that anymore. The density of those, the availability of those materials simply isn't there. And so now we need to act more like farmers, right? So we're going out and deliberately planting trees for future generations of guitar makers so that you could have the materials that you want to have continue into the future.
Wow, that's a whole new area for you. So, talk to me a little about, and I see this in companies I've run where you've got R&Ds coming up with this great product, and the manufacturing guys are going, yeah, but we can't make it, etc. So you've got craftsmen over on one side designing, the world's best guitars, etc. And then you got manufacturing guys probably going, how are we going to do that? How are you managing that tension?
That that's a good point. One of the ways that we do it is by having everything in-house. We don't
Okay.
really do what I would describe as like a source and sell kind of business model where something might be designed and you have an OEM manufacturer make it for you, you bring it in, and then you sell it. We don't really work that way. So like here on our El Cajon campus, we have our engineers, our tool makers, our machinists, like really right on top of and working, collaborating with our manufacturing teams so that we're running back and forth all day, every day. And we go through a process to implement ideas or new tools to go, what are the needs of the factory? How are we going to make it? Okay, let's start bringing some of the production work into the tooling shop and into the engineering shop and vice versa to slowly implement this thing into production. And so it's a very collaborative kind of effort.
Okay. And you end up with a product like you've got, etc. So does that, yeah, and I don't know much about the product, is that represent kind of like the epitome of craftsmanship you've got, but with the scalability of manufacturing?
Right. So this is a new instrument that we're building. This one is very interesting because it's arguably one of our most traditional styled and sounding instruments that we've ever built, and yet it's kind of hiding some of the most innovative technologies we've ever designed.
Hmm.
So
Can you tell us what they are, or
yeah,
is that
yeah.
a secret?
No, there's not a whole lot of secrets in guitar making.
Okay.
So the top architecture, there's a lot of braces and ways you can voice an instrument. I mean, an acoustic guitar, it's a pretty simple thing from a distance until you
Yep.
realize there are no straight lines. Every curve matters. The shape of every part matters. The weight of every part matters. Everything matters. And so the internal architecture is a system that I designed a number of years ago that changed a long-standing tradition of how acoustic guitars were to be put together. And so that design, it's a very adaptable thing to be able to create different kinds of sounds coming out of that. Coupled with that is this part that we call the neck of the guitar. This traditionally would be joined into this kind of larger body portion with a very traditional tapered dovetail joint where the parts just get glued together. Well, over time, these strings that you stretch across it, they've got more than 150 pounds of tension on that. This guitar is going to try and fold up and collapse in with this giant hole right in the middle. It's actually a terrible design in some ways. And so what you need to do is be able to control the geometry of that. Well, the way that that's been done for the last for centuries now, is you take the thing apart, you try to use some steam and some careful woodworking to get these things apart, reestablish the geometry as the instrument ages. It's a whole operation that isn't always successful. This design is actually adjustable with just a screwdriver. And so that for the life of the instrument, for the rest of my working lifetime and for centuries beyond, this instrument, all you have to do is you adjust it until you like the way it plays, and then you start making music.
And give me an example of what would the best use of that guitar you've got in your hands? What kind of music would you play? Or maybe just play
This
it.
one, I'll just play a song.
Well, I mean, that sounded beautiful. So, as a master
Well,
guitar
thank you.
player, tell me what sound or what words would you use to describe how you wanted that guitar to sound?
This guitar is going to sound like an old friend. It's a very
Okay.
warm sounding guitar. It's a familiar sound. It's kind of like the sonic equivalent of comfort food, whatever that is for you.
Okay.
It's kind of like a time honed sound that, as a community of guitar players, we go, yeah, it sounds almost like an old record or something,
Okay.
right? So it's a little different than a real high definition, ultra fidelity, modern kind of a sound that you might use in a more studio environment.
Okay. All right, let me switch gears on you a little bit and ask a question about, I mentioned in the intro that it was an employee-owned company. Uh, what's some of the benefits and the challenges of being an ESOP company?
Okay, so an ESOP company that certainly has its challenges.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that we had wanted to do, it took us a long time to get to this point. Uh, we wanted to look at what the purpose of our company was. Because certainly one of the outcomes of any successful business is you want to earn an income. You want to earn some profit. You want to pay your bills. You want to pay yourself. You want to pay your vendors, your suppliers. You want to do some business. But that's not the only thing that matters. In our case, the company was successful. It was founded and became successful because we wanted to build great instruments and put them into the hands of musicians, right? A lot of companies, passion-driven companies, are founded that way. Might
Right.
start with one passionate individual going, they're asking themselves, I want to build this instrument or this thing so that I can get it to this musician who's asking for it.
Mhm.
And then slowly they do that enough where they add, some production, they add some scale, they add, and before you know, you have an accounting department and an HR department and a logistics team and all the things. A business grows out of that. Okay, but the purpose remained intact. The purpose was still there, which is I want to build, in our case, instruments that contribute to the betterment of our customers. Okay, so let's consider what happens to a company once it starts growing. At some point, it has to be sold.
Mhm.
It has to be sold on the day you die or some point before. So that usually means you're going to sell it by accident or you're going to sell it on purpose. And so we started planning for a succession Go, what should the next generation of Taylor guitars look like? Okay, well, what are your options? You could have private equity, you could have venture capital come in, you could sell to a competitor. There's a couple of different strategies that could work potentially. But one thing that all of them seem to lack for us is that the purpose that drove us to begin with, there was a high chance that that would be lost. Because most of the time, when a second or a third owner comes into a company, they're looking to get a return on their investment. And so instead of asking themselves, what can I give to these customers? How can I contribute to their enjoyment of our product? They're looking at the customer and saying, what can I take from that customer? How much can I get from them in response to what I'm giving them? That's a 180-degree different perspective. And so when we looked at that, we go, well, that means that the likelihood of this company continuing with the same purpose, the same integral purpose at its core, that will probably shift. And that's not something that we want. And so we ended up discovering and then going down the path of creating an ESOP ownership structure, because that was a way both to share the kind of the benefit with all of the employees who helped create this company, past, present, and long into the future, as well as allow it to be driven or guided by the same founding principle that led us here to begin with.
Okay. And did you have enough capital inside the business to be able to do this? How did you
No,
finance this thing? 'Cause-
the mechanics. That's the part that makes it tricky, because in
Yep.
our case, we did some seller financing. So I had come in as an ownership partner alongside the two founders in 2019. And so together we go, okay, well, we will seller finance this transaction for a portion of it, as well as bring in outside financing in the form of loans
Yep.
to help fund this transaction. The business itself is actually held as a trust, and then shares are allocated out almost like it was an inheritance. They're handed
Okay.
out a little bit at a time to all of our employees annually in perpetuity.
And so do you go to all employees, or is it how deep does this ownership go?
Yeah, in this case, because of our kind of our own values, it was important to us to include all of our employees. Now, that means that for all of the employees working here in El Cajon, California, of course.
Okay.
It also means all of our employees who are working in Tecate, Mexico, where we have our second factory. That was a unique challenge because it's, as far as we understand, it was the first time an ESOP has ever been executed in Mexico.
Okay.
So felt a lot like writing the rules. That was quite challenging. We also have mirror plans to handle all of our European-based employees, as well as some other employees in Japan and in other parts of Central or South America. And so, yes,
Okay.
we wanted it to be comprehensive for everyone.
And do you feel like that structure enabled more innovation, or do you feel like it was maybe limiting a little bit on because of the capital that was in the company? Or?
I think it's some of both. I mean,
Okay.
certainly it creates more impetus for saying we need to continue growing. We have to continue staying at the forefront of our industry, because growth is what eventually allows this to continue. You know, you've got a debt to pay. Well, the intention is not to simply kick the can down the road and service debt. It's eliminate that debt, right? And so there is a strong drive towards staying at the forefront of the industry. What it also gives you is the chance to look at all of your coworkers and say, you're all co-owners. We all have a stake in this. Let's all put our heads together and work hard to make this successful, make it more successful, knowing full well that you will enjoy some of the benefit of that work.
So interesting. And so as you think about, as you've kind of continued to innovate, and obviously the people have benefited, I mean, you've launched a line of electric guitars called the Powers Electric guitar. Tell us about that because it's obviously a different brand than the Taylor brand, and maybe you view it as a sub brand. I don't know, but what was the inspiration for having a separate line called the Powers Electric?
Okay, so as part of our longer term initiatives, we want to continue growing. We want to become the industry leader in other categories that are kind of adjacent to where we already have great market share. So I was dabbling with electric guitar designs because being a Southern California kid, I've always enjoyed electric guitars, worked on a lot of them, played them. I've got my own ideas of what I want that to be. And so I started designing some electric guitars and went, a reality is that the Taylor brand has there's kind of an understanding of what that is, what it symbolizes to the community of musicians, to our customer base. And if I introduce an electric guitar, I'm either going to alienate some of those users or limit adoption by others. Okay, so if we create it as a different brand, then it gives us complete permission to use different design language, to have a different look, a different feel, a different kind of initiative to that brand. So it's sort of, the guitar itself was very unique, very innovative, a lot of ground up kind of fresh thought that went into it. But from a branding exercise, it seemed very clear that this can't follow exactly the same trajectory as our Taylor branded acoustic guitars because it's a different portion of the market. They're expecting something different.
Is it being well received?
It is. That's a real fun. That has been a very exciting project. It's more of a passion project of mine to watch this thing start growing because I love the instrument. I love how it sounds, what makes it so unique, and we're starting it at a different scale than the kind of thing that we would work at for a Taylor guitar, where it might start not as hundreds of guitars a day the way we build Taylors, but as one, then two, then three, and you watch it continue to grow as musicians discover this instrument and make it part of their musical careers.
And does it have the same kind of aspirational value? I know, I talked to some friends and they're like, oh, owning a Taylor guitar is like the ultimate. That's what I want to do. Is the Powers electric guitar like kind of up there in terms of being the ultimate as well?
Yeah, yes, it's a very high grade, high level professional instrument. And because most things, if you're going to build it yourself, it's going to have to start at the upper end, both because there are fewer in number and because it's not going to be easy to do. There's not a built-in demand for that instrument. And so your ability to produce it has to be well aligned for the pace that demand is created. And so a disproportionate number of these guitars are going to professional musicians who discover the instrument and go, this has unique sounds, a unique feel. I don't have anything like this. Gives me fresh inspiration. So I would bet, okay, in the world of Taylor guitars, maybe 1 out of 1,000 instruments we make might go to a professional musician. But for Powers Electric, probably 1 out of 2 are going to a professional musician. So it's a whole different kind of way to start that pyramid of influence.
Okay. Now, as a CEO, you are kind of the point person having to deal with figuring out some of the macroeconomic environments that are challenging. COVID was well known that during that time frame, playing took off, and people had a lot of free time, they had some spare cash, etc., and they bought a lot of guitars. Talk about how that went and how was it afterwards and how is it now, because that's you had a very unusual as no CEO was given a playbook on how to handle COVID. In your case, COVID probably was a boon to you, right?
It was an enormous boom. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And one of the problems was that everyone wanted to stay home and play guitar. One of the benefits, everyone wanted to stay home and play guitar.
Right.
And so that meant that we had enormous spike in demand, the likes of which we couldn't possibly fill. So we were going to we'll try to do what we can, because one risk of demand like that is we sell our products through a network of retailers around the world. That means that if they can't get products to sell, they won't stay in business. They won't be there long term the way we need them to be. So in an environment where few of our competitors were able to supply guitars for our retailers to sell. We were trying to fill as much of the demand as we could, on one hand because it's there, and because we need to support the industry. So when that demand thawed, it thawed very quickly. I mean, that demand melted like an ice cream cone on a July day. It was gone in a flash. As soon as people wanted to buy airplane tickets and book vacations and go out to eat and those things that they hadn't been doing in a number of years. And so for us, it was a major shift in the kind of volume that we were doing, which that's a challenge. It's a challenge to downshift a factory. And so that was tough. We did it, some parts of it we did very well. Other parts we could have done better. But as you said, there certainly wasn't a playbook for that. And so in
Were
this,
you stock owned at the time?
yes, yes, we were.
So how that would have made it probably even more challenging because you feel like you're cutting off part of your family.
Yeah, it is a real challenge. I mean, most of what we did was we started pulling back from the overall daily volume and starting to transition towards more high-end only instruments.
Okay.
Going, okay, well, let's focus on this part of the market because this is a little more stable, not quite such a big spike, not quite such a big dip when the demand falls away. Let's push a little here. We're going to back away from the increases that we had made at one point in our Tecate factory from, I believe it was more than a year and a half. We were working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We had divided our work teams into 4 separate crews, working kind of 4 work weeks, dividing a 7-day period up as a 3-day work week and a 4, running 12-hour shifts. So that was a challenge. So we, backed away from that. That changes the overall volume. Same with here in El Cajon. We went from 3 shifts a day back to 2 and kind of just slowly backed away and tried to smooth that out as best we could.
Okay. And let's talk about a less significant, but certainly a confusing macroeconomic situation, tariffs. You've talked about the Tecate factory. What's happening on that? How's that impacting you? I know we don't have a crystal ball in terms of where it's going to end up, but how are you responding to the potential imposition of tariffs on goods coming in from Mexico?
Now, that was when that started to become like a hot topic for a lot of businesses. We were certainly in the same realm as all of our other kind of colleagues in different industries to go, there's no clarity on how these are going to be implemented, what is affected, what isn't affected, how will it be enacted, how will it be enforced, how will the tariffs be collected, all of the questions. And so that kind of got kicked down the road a few times. And then once the tariff picture became a little clearer as an actual plan, you go, okay, now here are some rules that we can follow. So, I mean, reading through all of the executive orders and the annexes that are attached feels like reading through the phone book. It's incredibly dry reading. But as a direct manufacturer, it actually, so far, fortune kind of smiled on us because many of the raw materials that we would use to build the instruments are exempted from a lot of the tariff activity. Our Tecate factory is established as a maquiladora, which means that it's operating under the USMCA agreement. Mm-hmm. So it's almost like it's an extension of the American company, but on Mexican soil, right? So those goods will come into the US tariff-free as finished goods. So most of our materials, those are also coming in tariff-free. In most cases, there's a few exceptions, but because they're in a raw or minimally transformed state, our materials come into either Tecate or into here in El Cajon. Guitars are built in both factories, but because of the structure and the proximity, those instruments are mostly exempted. And so we've had a pretty good kind of a lack of disruption, I guess is the best way to say it, as these tariffs have kind of come into our lives, been established, been paused. There's certainly volatility and uncertainty of how it plays out in the long run. But for right now, knock on wood, we've been largely unaffected.
Okay, well, that's good. Are you seeing a growth in international sales? I don't know. Does the rest of the world view Taylor guitars as kind of the top of the pyramid and some of the best? And I know there's some, guitar brands from Japan, other places, etc. So, how are you perceived internationally?
Well, we do enjoy the position of being one of, I'd say it that way, I'll qualify it as one of the premier brands of guitar
Okay.
world over. Now, that means that our instruments, they are pretty expensive in a lot of parts
Mhm.
of the world. We see increasing sales internationally, but it varies by region. Okay, so throughout Europe, right now, we're seeing a little more market softness than we had, say, last year, because a lot of the European nations are starting to experience the post-COVID softness that the US experienced in 23 and 24. So in certain parts, we're seeing softness there. In Japan, we've actually started our own distribution for direct sales in Japan, and we're seeing that market grow significantly. A big market for us that had been a huge growth driver for a number of years prior to the pandemic was China. There was
Mm.
a tremendous appetite for American built guitars, for our guitars specifically, throughout China. Now, what has been interesting there is to watch how the government has actively discouraged people from pursuing recreational or kind of personal betterment activities. So they're discouraging things like music lessons or time spent with recreation like that. So consequently, our sales in China have fallen off dramatically. And I know I can speak from my other colleagues within the industry that that's also true for things like pianos, other brands of guitars, violins, all kinds of instruments in every form. Sales have fallen off dramatically in China, and so it's a mix. You see one part of the world rise, you see another get softer, you see some one style of music become popular over here, and that means that you won't hear as many of these kinds of songs in a different part of the world or a different radio station or whatever it might be.
Okay, cool. We've just got a few minutes left. Let me pick up a couple of audience questions. One of which is, I love all of your work, Andy, but what is your favorite Taylor guitar that you've designed? And please don't answer all of them.
Yeah, okay, okay. I I tend to get excited for the guitar that's coming next. That's the thing that's been freshest in my mind. It's the one that's about to be launched out into the world. So I feel excited and exuberant about seeing that instrument come out. So actually, tomorrow you'll see a new instrument come out from us that I've been working on for a number of time. I've been wanting to build for a number of years. I'm absolutely thrilled with it. So that one's, if you ask me today, that's my favorite. It'll be called the Grand Pacific 717.
There we
You
go.
ask me the
Breaking news
day, yeah,
right here. There you go. So it's the favorite is the most recent one.
it tends to be the guitar that I'm going to build next.
Okay. Uh, Another question is, what makes a great guitar?
Couple of mechanical things. It has to be able to play well. It has to play accurately. It has to play in tune. That seems logical, just functional things. But beyond that, it's the one that gives me the most inspiration. It's the one that takes me someplace new. It's the one that allows me to make sense of a wider world around me. And so for a musician, yes, it's got to function well. But beyond that, I'm in the business of pursuing inspiration. I want that instrument to make me feel like like I'm stepping away from the world I inhabit.
So as we wrap up here, you feel like a guy that obviously has done his 10,000 hours, got his passion, loves this. You're going to keep doing this for a long time?
I intend to keep doing this as long as I am able. As long as I
That's
am
great.
able.
Okay. That
There,
that is awesome. Well, Andy, I want to thank you. I said we'd finish on time. I know you're a busy guy. You're running a company and a lot of things going on. So thank you for joining us today. This was terrific. Thank you to the audience for listening in today. Hopefully you enjoyed listening to Andy and the his story and the Taylor Guitar story. And we hope you can join us for the next event, which is with the co-CEO of Oak Tree Capital. Going to be different than this one,
Okay,
but certainly also interesting as well. So, Andy, thank you very much
okay.
for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, I'll end the webinar now. Thank you.